how many pieces of evidence are there to suggest that the church is true? It is bonkers. It is ridiculous. It is insane. I mean, we're not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of evidence that people cannot explain.
What's up, guys? We are back with our friend Wyatt here. He's joined us a couple of times, and today he's got some really cool stuff that he's going to talk about.
Knowledge.
Drop some good nuggets of knowledge here.
Logic bombs.
So he's talked about, his conversion to the church, and a lot of what he's going to cover today about logic and how that process worked for him. We're just going to dive into that.
So we are his students. Over to you.
We are just here.
That sounds good. Yeah, so a lot of people mentioned in the comments, they're like, there's no way that you can prove religion with logic, because that was the big, bold, controversial statement that I said in the last video, right? That I said the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the most logical religion that I've ever found. And that caused a whole bunch of discord on both sides of the spectrum. People being spiritual, you can't bring logic into the equation. You can't prove God through logic. You get blah, 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 blah. I treat it as the idle chatter of monkeys because they have obviously not done the work that I have. And so we're going to cover my argument for that today. Okay. And before I do that, we got to go over 4 disclaimers really quick. So the first disclaimer that I need to say is that I'm not trying to prove that the church is true through logic. That is impossible. In the very first step of my thesis, if you will, I'm going to say that we can't do that because we would need primary evidence to do that. That is impossible. On the same note, though, you can't you can't disprove the church by logic. Exactly. And you can't do that with any religion. And that's totally fine. What I am going to show you is my system, my step-by-step system, where I've come out the other end and being like, this is the most logical religion I've ever seen in my entire life, right? That is what we are going to do. Okay, so the second disclaimer that I have is whenever you're speaking logically about religion, I really, really caution you to filter out who you're going to talk to about this or who you're going to receive information through. Just like with anything that you can study in the world, there are people that are for it and there are people that are against it. And it is very important logically to hear both of their stories. I hear so many people who are on the opposite sides, people who think that the church is 100% true and never looked into the arguments against it. And that is dangerous. It is the same for the opposite side, for people who have only looked into the arguments and not seen any of the arguments that are for the church itself. That is stupid. They should be unqualified when they are talking about that kind of stuff. You should only trust people that have looked at both sides and then bring up the information together, which is what I'm going to try to do today. You see what I'm saying? So the third thing that I need to say is that logic and spirituality are not enemies. And the biggest thing when it comes to religion is the spiritualness of it. The entire concept of why I've done this, why I've spent so much time on this, is to help me feel the Spirit better. Okay. Like I said in a previous video, I had my spiritual revelation. I know that this church is true, but me studying it logically has only strengthened that. Again, on both sides, I've heard people being like, you can't bring logic in, this is stupid. On both sides, both people in the church being like, don't you dare talk about logic here. And it's like,
church where logic comes to die.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the third disclaimer. And then the fourth disclaimer is I'm going to be treating this like a court case. This is really weird, but I really like court cases. I love studying them. I love understanding logically how they're broken down. And that is how I am going to treat this, okay? So let's get into it. Now, there are 4 steps to my argument, okay? The very first step is, just to go as a brief overview, is to talk about primary versus secondary evidence. People love to mix these things up and concoct all kinds of conclusions by mixing these things up, and you are setting yourself up to fail by doing that. That's the first thing we're going to do. Second thing that we are going to do is we are going to talk about why faith is 100% needed regardless of your belief. You are literally going to need just as much faith or more being an atheist in your beliefs as we do in our religion. We are all on the same playing field when it comes to spirituality, okay? The third thing that we're going to talk about is the argument from design. Now, there may be those who have heard this argument before and they're rolling their eyes at this point. I have a different take on it. Stay tuned, okay? Okay?
Don't give up.
Yeah. And then the fourth one is the weighing of the scales. After we went through the system and we've looked at all the evidence for and against the church, where do the scales set? Is it for the church? Is it against the church? My experience is that after I went through it and over 10,000 hours worth of studying this, is that the scales are not just like this, where it's like, okay, there's a little bit more evidence suggesting it's true, or a little bit more evidence suggesting it's not true. It's like this, where there is so much secondary evidence suggesting that the church is true. It is ridiculous. It is bonkers. It is unprecedented how much evidence there is to prove that this church is true.
Bonkers.
Bonkers.
I want that to be a sticker because that's the perfect word.
So with that, let's start with step number 1. Do you guys know the difference between secondary versus primary evidence?
If
Does it have to do with secondary or primary and secondary? I'm thinking research though. That's the mark.
It has to do with it.
because
I don't know.
is primary what I've experienced?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
yes.
irrefutable.
So primary is what I've seen, what
Yep.
I've touched,
Yep.
which only you can have.
Only you can have. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So primary is irrefutable. It cannot be argued. It is proven. There is no way to dismantle that, right? Now you're starting to see, well, wait, there's nothing in religion that is like that, right? Your experience, if you tell me your testimony of the Book of Mormon or your testimony of eternal families, that is secondary evidence. Those are just things that they have felt. I have not felt that. I don't understand that. I can be like, they were tired when they felt that. They were sick when they felt that. They made it up. They're lying. They're whatever it is, right?
Right.
So primary, just as a definition, is irrefutable. It cannot be argued, right? Secondary is something that suggests something is true, but can be argued, right? So for example, when Joseph Smith was in the grove and he saw Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, that was his primary evidence that they exist. However, anytime he shared it after that, it became secondary because now we have to trust that he is saying the truth, right? There is evidence suggesting that he is telling the truth. We can be like, he's lying, he's making it up, he was drunk, he was whatever it is, right? So everything I'm about to go forth and say is secondary, not primary. The only way that primary would work in this situation is if God appeared to all of us and explained, I am God, I am proving to you that I am God. Let me show you why I am God. By the way, this is my church, right? That is the only way. And it doesn't exist with anything. With atheistic views, agnostic views, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, it doesn't matter. Primary evidence doesn't exist.
And which is interesting too, because like primary evidence in regards to the absence of religion, it's impossible.
It's impossible.
Because you're not going to have God come and say, oh, I don't exist. And
Exactly, right?
Whoa.
So,
That's interesting.
So everything that we're moving forward in this point, any belief that anyone watching this has is all based off of secondary evidence. Now, my challenge to you is weigh the scales. What is the secondary evidence for what you believe in? What is the secondary evidence against what you believe in? That is the concept, right? If you don't do this, you're walking around with half researched beliefs at that point, right? And so now we move into step 2, which is understanding that everyone has to have faith moving forward. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist. It doesn't matter if you're agnostic or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever it is. There is evidence for and against every single religion, okay? To suggest that we that believe in God and that believe in Jesus Christ, we're like just grabbing at straws right now just to find any bit of logic that exists, any bit of evidence that exists. And yet the people that are atheists, they're like, oh, clearly there's more evidence for being atheist. Clearly there's more evidence for being agnostic is not true. In fact, when we get into the argument in design, you actually see you're probably going to have more faith being an atheist than you are believing in a God, right?
Significant amount of faith.
Which
to
is
be an atheist.
Yeah, so it's like, so understanding this, that
is it cool because faith, by definition, is believing in something you can't see, but you hope is real, right? And when it comes to science. There's a lot of faith.
There's a ton
There's
of
a
faith.
lot of faith.
There's a lot of faith
That's why
because
theories
we can't see. Yeah, the theories we can't see. We can't see millions of years ago or in the future. There's just a lot of things that we just logically try to line up.
That's right.
And move forward. And a lot of times those theories get proven wrong 100 years later.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So really, the faith in this context means a confidence in your belief, right? So if you're an atheist, for example, you're going to have an enormous amount of faith that every single piece of evidence that suggests that Jesus is the Christ, that God exists, that Joseph Smith was a prophet, you have to believe that one day every single piece of secondary evidence that suggests those things will one day be proven false or taken out of context or a straight up lie or whatever. You have to have faith that one day those things will be proven. You have to have faith that every other religion is false. You have to have faith that there's no God. You have to have faith in all those kinds of things. You have to believe that one day those things will be proven, right? Everyone has to have faith, no matter what, right?
We're not saying that you're actively doing that.
Right.
But it's inherent in your life choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now we are getting to step 3, which is the argument from design. Now, for those who don't know what that is, how likely is it that you exist? How likely is it that the Earth is here, that the sun forms, that there's just some unorchestrated big bang in the universe and we all just showed up? And for that, we're going to get through this as fast as possible because I could spend so much time on this.
And a lot of people have, there's lots of stuff on this. Yeah.
So what I want to do to demonstrate this is we want to create an improbability scale right now. So we want to, as everyone in this room, there's 5 people in this room right now, we are going to set what is so improbable that it's basically impossible. What number does it have to be where it's so improbable that it's basically impossible? And we can all do this right now. It's actually relatively easy, okay? So if I had a die, not a dice, those are 2 dice. If I had a die and I rolled a 6, what is the probability that I rolled a 6? Anyone?
1 out of 6.
1 out of 6. Okay, so we're creating our scale right now, right? So here's our scale, and right down here at the bottom is 1/6, okay? Now, if I was to roll a die twice and get 6 twice, what is the probability that that is going to happen?
Oh, Shoot.
Is
One
that
half?
36?
1 out of 36. That's
Yeah.
right. So you have to scale it every single time. So it'd be 1
One
over
out.
6 to the second
I
power.
Close though.
Oh, yeah.
This
Okay.
is not my
Okay.
I play
but
D&D.
I will
You-
follow.
you-
Yeah, we
know
roll
what's
a lot of dice.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, right? So this is good. Okay, but still 1 out of 36, that's still pretty probable, right? Okay, so let's crank it up a bit. What about 1 over 6 to the 35th power? What if I rolled a die and got 6 35 times? How big is that number? You guys give
I'm
me
not
a...
going to do
I'm
it in
not
my
even
head.
gonna-
Okay, so 1 over 6 to the 35th power. So I can't write this out. It'd take too long. It is a number that is roughly 34 to 35 digits long. Okay,
Okay.
so this is enormous. Basically, I mean, a billion
It would
is 10
if
digits
you
long,
roll
right?
die for your entire life.
Yeah.
It would not happen.
Never,
Yeah.
never, ever. I mean, we're talking about something that's so statistically improbable that it will never happen. It is a number that is 1 over 10 with however many zeros there is at the end, like 30 plus zeros. That is an
We don't have
astronomical
words
number.
for that. At least we don't.
In no other circumstance would you say that is probable. If you invested in something, if you invested $1 million in something and they said there is a 1 over 6 to the 35 chance that you can get your money back, you would never do it.
Yeah.
Same with any other concept, right? So can everyone in this room agree that you would never, ever, ever put your faith in something that was 1 over 6 to the 35th power? We are
Yeah.
statistically at the roof of statistical improbability, okay? So now let's double it. Let's go to 1 over 6 to the 70th power. This is a number that is 70 digits long. It is ridiculous. It is huge. It is unfathomable. This exact number is the probability that the time at the Big Bang, and this is just one aspect of the Big Bang, by the way, is the expansion of the Big Bang. That it's 1 over 6 to the 70th power. The Big Bang had to expand it at a precise speed for it to keep growing. Too small and it implodes back in on itself. Too big and it just flurries out of control, right? But it happened the first time. It's just one aspect of the Big Bang. That is the likelihood that that happened perfectly, unorchestrated, with no help whatsoever. But that's just one piece of the pie. Now you got to get into the planets forming, a sun forming, an Earth forming just far enough away from the sun.
distance?
Yeah, just the perfect distance. And then humans forming, humans that can reproduce, that can heal themselves, that can eat the things that are on the Earth so that they can grow. Animals are there, so on and so forth. Once you start compounding every single thing that has happened to create this universe, it is ridiculous. So my question to you is, if we can all agree that 1 over 6 to the 35th power is not something that you would put your faith in. However, the atheistic point of view is to put your faith in something that is drastically bigger than 1 over 6 to the 35th power. How can you justify that? How you can say this number down here, completely improbable, but this number up here, completely probable. I'm going to put my faith in that. How can you do that? How can you look me in the eyes and say that is what you're going to do? Right? The counter argument to that is evolution. It's a very poor argument because that can only answer what happened on Earth. Evolution does not apply to the Big Bang. Another argument is, okay, it's the monkey typewriter theory. You guys ever heard that theory?
Mm-mm.
If you gave a monkey a typewriter in an infinite amount of time, eventually he can write Hamlet. And again, so it's the concept of, okay,
But-
we're in a multiverse, right? And so there's an
Right.
infinite amount of worlds, and so we just happen to be Hamlet.
But
so
what's
to say.
interesting
Okay.
is for that same reason, a god could exist.
It's the same reason
If
that
you give
God-
a monkey a typewriter, then eventually an all-powerful being could be created.
Yeah, exactly.
Created his own world.
Exactly.
So
Like,
it's
this is the same
like-
numbers.
Exactly.
Like, it could happen.
And again, we can put that theory on the scale. How likely is it that we are the one Earth, or one amongst very, very few anomaly level Earths that created life? What is the probability of that? I would assume that it's above our threshold of improbability, right? Now I got one more number because this is
you're
really
good.
fun. So this is like even further up. Oh no, I did the freaking. There we go. So one more number, and I'm so sorry for the people seeing my handwriting; it's atrocious. But 1 over 10 to the 127th power. So this is an enormous number. I mean, obviously bigger than any of the numbers that we have claimed so far. This is the statistical probability that one human protein, that enough amino acids could come and form a human protein without any other external force to create one human protein. That is the statistical improbability that they could do that, right? And then remember, we're built up of a whole bunch of proteins for thousands of years, however long humans, hundreds of thousands of years, however long humans have been here, right? To do it again and again and again and again and again. So again, just one human protein. That is the statistical probability. Do you really feel confident in believing that this is just random? That this has just happened? Are you serious right now? You see,
I
what I'm saying?
can feel you like choking them.
Yeah, it's
Are
just
you
like
kidding me?
like I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm into investing. I have my own company. I have to look at the numbers. Are you kidding me right now? It's just the numbers are against you by far, right? There's other counter arguments. None of them are really, really good. Some of them are like, Well, in the Bible, it says that everyone has to come to the unity of faith, but is there any unity of faith? No, everyone believes different things. Therefore, God can't exist. It's like, you are an actual idiot. You are like, oh my gosh, like this is a terrible argument, so on and so forth, okay? So now that brings us to step 4, which is the weighing of the scales, okay? Once you start going through this process and you start examining the secondary evidence that is for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, obviously, I cannot cover that in a 15-minute video.
I mean, the faith and beliefs, just watch all of
Just watch,
David's
yeah, exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
That's all. That's
Exactly,
a lot
kind
of
of stuff.
secondary.
Exactly. How many pieces of evidence are there to suggest that the church is true? It is bonkers. It is ridiculous. It is insane. I mean, we're not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of evidence that people cannot explain. How can you explain even just First Nephi? How can you do that? How can you look at this uneducated farm boy from New York and somehow he understood perfectly Hebraisms? How can you do that? How can you be like, oh yeah, he clearly understood the way that Hebrews talked in that part of the world at that time, and I'm going to put this into a book? How can you justify that? How can you explain that away? How can you explain all the miracles that he performed? How can you explain any of those things? So yeah, the concept comes into, how do you explain even just one part? Like, how do you explain First Nephi? How do you explain the entire Book of Mormon? How do you explain all the experiences of the early saints? How do you explain all the miracles that Joseph Smith performed? How do you explain all the miracles that the prophets nowadays have performed? How do you explain all the amazing experiences that missionaries go through on a daily basis? How can you account for all of this secondary evidence, right? You're basically going to have to say it's all coincidence. It's all coincidence. They're all lying. They're all in on it. They're tricking themselves. They're under mass hypnosis.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah,
conspiracy.
exactly.
You're going to have to account for
in
every
the
one of
history
those.
of conspiracies, I think ours would be the biggest.
Yeah, it'd be the
You know,
biggest
like, I
conspiracy
think it really
ever.
would
You can't
be.
get that many people to keep a secret.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, let's just be clear. There is no conspiracy.
So then we get to the end, which, really quick, there are arguments against the church. There are things that I have studied against the church, some with polygamy, blacks in the priesthood, so on and so forth. There are some things, little sectors of those concepts where it's just like, yep, I can't explain that. That looks pretty bad. As a logical, objective researcher, it's like, I have no way I can explain that away. There may be an answer for it, but I don't have that right now. So I'm going to put that in the tally for against the church right now. Also, there could potentially be answers for those things that I don't have answers for right now. I could potentially come up with an answer right now, and just by virtue of me potentially coming up with an answer is evidence that there could be an answer, right? I may not know it. It could be messed up.
Talking numbers.
Yeah, if we're talking numbers, yeah, statistically
exactly.
speaking, we can probably come up with something right now, but even if it's true or not, just the fact that we came up with it shows that something
There
could
be
an explanation that we don't have yet. Or there's not. I don't really care, because once you get to the weighing of the scales and you examine, after you go through all the garbage that people say against the church, which there is like so much, there's very, very few arguments where you're like, that actually makes sense, right? But once you get there, it's like, it's the weighing of the scales, right? Where are we at? And in my experience, after going through 10,000 hours worth of studying, talking with protester after protester after protester, reading blogs, anti-Mormon blogs and books and so on and so forth, as a researcher, I have come out the other end being like, it's a landslide, like by far. Like the amount of evidence suggesting that church is true is ridiculous. And then, here's the kicker, fortifying that with my spiritual experiences, it's just like,
Yeah, what are you supposed to, like, what can you do?
What can you do at that point? Exactly. And so, in a nutshell, that's what I would highly encourage anyone to do. Okay. Look at the primary versus secondary evidence in any of your beliefs. Okay. Understand that we all need faith. Look at the argument by design and then weigh the scales at the end. And where do they fall? For me, every single time it's the same answer. So that is why I'm here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you need a mic
Got
to
it.
drop? We can pull this down.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah.
Oh.
On my end, I'm
nope.
good.
Yep.
I'm
You guys,
good. Jake,
comment?
anyone?
Yeah, I mean,
I love counter arguments.
if I was to say, if you guys, because you were keeping track of the comments in the last video you were in, would it be fair to say that if somebody commented for or against, that you might respond?
Totally. I would love to do that, but make sure it's a good comment. If you say that was stupid, I'm not going to respond to you. If you say you're just basing your feelings off whatever, I'm not going to respond to you. If you're like, okay, Wyatt, but how do you account for the argument from design in blah, 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 blah? Great question. Let's talk about it. How do you account for Joseph Smith doing blah, 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 blah? Great question. Let's talk about it. However, I can smell the blood in the water from a mile away. I can just tell if you're leading me up to hell, because I've had a lot of these kind of conversations. And if you're set in your ways, I'm really not going to talk to you about it.
Well, and then don't waste your time.
Yeah,
you
don't
already
waste your
know
time,
the
yeah.
answer that you want to give. Like,
exactly.
so,
Go do something more productive. Go invest in Tesla stocks. Go don't waste your time.
Actually, also a hot take on investment here.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Thanks so much, Wyatt. Thanks for thanks for sharing your testimony.
Yeah.
This lesson.
This was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
This was
that was
way
real
cool.
fun.
I've got like so many people people in my family that would really enjoy this. So
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Like you said, comments. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell. Classic YouTuber stuff. But thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you.